you doing?
Hey everybody, and welcome to Channel 9 Live. We're at TechEd North America 2013. It's time to do a little bit of a keynote wrap-up, but I've decided I think we should do this a little bit differently. So I'd like to first welcome all of the press that we have inside the room here, and also to the media and the press that are watching online. You can interact with us by sending your questions via Twitter to @CH9Live. And with me, I have a distinguished panel to kind of cover off what we've just seen in the keynote. Brad Anderson. Also with me, Scott Guthrie and Erwin Visser. Hi guys, how are we?
Good. Yeah, great.
Brad, I'm going to start with you. I'm going to pick on you a little bit. So let's kind of kick it off. Let's go reverse order from how we kind of did the keynote. And first kind of start and talk about the announcements and things that were made around Windows Server, System Center, the whole transforming the data center kind of thing.
Okay. You know, so I hope what came across as we were walking through all this amount of innovation is all the work that we have done to really enable our customers, whether that's IT, service providers, to all embrace and move towards the cloud. You know, as we define, as we've built this set of deliverables, it really was entirely focused on how do we help our customers advance their business, advance to the cloud, take advantage of not only the economics, but the agility that brings. And then what we did is we broke it down into 4 distinct promises. And those 4 distinct promises are literally the promises that we're developing in this vision of ours and delivering on of the Cloud OS. So let me just go by those one by one, and we'll talk about the innovation and the announcements. So first of all, we promise that the Cloud OS empowers what we call people-centric IT, and that really is about enabling users to be productive on all their devices. So we talked about a lot of the work that we've done in conjunction with Windows and with Windows Phone on making it easy to do that, but then how we give this consistent experience across all the users' devices so they can get all their apps and all their data to be productive. And in that was announcement about new Windows Server, Server 2000 R2, System Center 2000 R2, and Intune, along with Windows 8.1. We then talked about the applications and the innovation that we're doing in Azure and in Visual Studio. And I honestly, that's some of the coolest demonstrations that I've ever seen from a Visual Studio perspective. But that was all focused really on enabling a more rapid life cycle. And in this modern world, it's all about build, deploy, learn, iterate. Okay, and so that's all what those innovations were, and the acquisition that we announced was a step, an additional step forward in that, and helping us to even improve that. We then talked about, all these applications create a lot of data, and in that data is insights that advance the business, that enable you to give a better experience to your customers. We talked about all the innovation in SQL as well as in Excel that just lights up and allows you to get all that data and just wallow in it and learn. And then finally, we talked about the cloud platform capabilities. Oh, and I'm sorry, with Visual Studio, we announced a new version of Visual Studio, so Visual Studio 2013. We announced a number of things with respect to Azure in terms of some of the MSDN subscriptions, some of the new capabilities in terms of billing. We announced a new version of SQL 2014, and then we ended on the cloud platform and all the work that we're doing there. And that's, again, Windows Server 2012 R2 and System Center 2012 R2. I got to tell you, it's a ton of innovation in a very short period of time.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, folks at home, make sure you tweet your questions also here inside the audience @CH9Live via Twitter. Brad, question I have for you. We talk a lot about the cloud operating system and the Cloud OS, and in particular, something that I'm extremely passionate about in my IT world is the hybrid IT vision. Yeah. These new announcements and these new products that we're bringing, how does that kind of help deliver that true hybrid vision?
Yeah. Even before I answer, let me just kind of give you kind of a view into kind of what's happening in the world right now. If you look at where x86 servers are being purchased at, you can look at how many servers are going into traditional IT, service providers, and public cloud. And you're seeing significant and tremendous growth of x86 servers being purchased by service providers and by public cloud providers like us with Azure. So as we saw these trends, as we defined and delivered on all these capabilities, we knew that hybrid would be just core and fundamental to every customer. So from the get-go, we designed everything with a hybrid model in nature. So the ability to seamlessly expand your existing data center out to service providers and out to Azure, and then delivering end-to-end capabilities and services like disaster recovery, backup, high availability, the ability to do load testing on your applications you're developing. But hybrid was just a core fundamental design point from day one on this cycle.
Awesome. A question I get all the time: why is Microsoft's Cloud OS solution what we call and have been saying is the best in market today?
Yeah, I think there's 2 aspects I would point out on that. First of all is this promise of consistency. Okay, and I can't overstate how important consistency is across all your clouds. Organizations should require, should demand, and shouldn't settle for anything less than the ability to be able to move their virtual machines and move their applications across clouds on demand at their leisure with no friction. The only way to really do that is by ensuring consistency in virtualization, developers, management, identity, and your data. And if you deliver that, it just makes it simple. That'd be the first thing I would point out, is consistency across clouds. The second thing is just the breadth of innovation that we're doing. The breadth of innovation, everything from enabling users on all their devices, through the development, through the data insights to the cloud, the breadth of all that, bringing that in a one holistic way that is consistent, again, across your clouds is the second. The third thing I would just point out is we are literally taking all the things that we learn in our public cloud and with these 200 plus services that we run and delivering that to customers. And we're the only organization in the world doing that.
We've got some questions on Twitter. So at Juliana Tanasoe, and I'm probably just slaughtering the name, so I apologize for that. The question is, why not fully migrate to the public cloud? So what are those advantages that you have by keeping that data within your own data center?
Yeah, well, I mean, as someone who spends a lot of time in the public cloud, obviously I'm a big fan of the public cloud. But, I think the public cloud provides kind of tremendous savings and opportunities for a wide variety of different scenarios. Having said that, there are still cases where, for a variety of reasons, whether you have existing infrastructure and you want to leverage it, whether for data sovereignty or privacy reasons, or it's a mission critical app that you want to basically be able to keep a very, very close eye on, the private cloud continues to make sense and will continue to make sense probably forever. And I think, kind of Brad touched on it pretty well in terms of the real power, I think, of our kind of cloud OS vision is how do we enable you not to have to make choices that are big choices that you can't ever reverse. And the nice thing about kind of the consistency that we're driving across our public and private cloud stories and across the infrastructure and the software building is it basically allows you to have a single skill set, single set of technologies, a single set of key kind of integration points across both, and not have to make those big choices that are forks in the road that you can't ever make a change from. And I think you saw a lot today in terms of how we're weaving together the public and private cloud into one. And that power of kind of and, we often say, is really a huge differentiator for what we're bringing to market. And I think hopefully you saw between the 2012 R2 server releases, the Windows Azure Pack that we announced today, things like the Recovery Manager integration inside Azure, the dev test offer that I talked about, that we're really starting to weave the products together in deep, deep ways that connect the two. And I think that basically means you don't have to make a choice. You can build apps, you can build solutions, you can run them everywhere.
You mentioned the Windows Azure Pack. So we've got, John Joyner asked the question, what are those components? What are the components of the Windows Azure Pack? And is this a new name for WASWS?
Windows Azure Services for Windows Server.
Yeah, we have a product that we shipped last December that was eloquently called Windows Azure Services for Windows Server 2012. It was a really cool product, although it was a really long name. And so one of the things that we kind of announced today was the next generation of that product, which has a whole bunch of new capabilities and features. But also we kind of simplified it to say Windows Azure Pack, just because that's a lot simpler to say. And at a high level, what it allows you to do is effectively download and install on your private cloud environment, or really across any Windows Server environment, a bunch of the features of Windows Azure. And it kind of talks a little bit to that kind of symmetry and consistency that we're trying to drive between the different environments. And specifically, the version that we showed today lets you set up a web environment, so you can have websites and web applications. You can manage your SQL databases. You can go ahead and manage your infrastructure as a service VMs, so you can run any VMs you want inside there. And you can also, one of the new things that were announced today is the ability to use Service Bus, which is kind of our messaging system. And the great thing is you can use that in the cloud, all these features in the cloud with Azure. You can now use all these features on Windows Server. And you can use a common management portal across the two. And what we're also enabling you to use is PowerShell and a common set of APIs for managing them across the two. And again, that kind of allows us to kind of tell a story and have a consistency model where developers can write to the same abstractions both places, IT managers and IT professionals can manage it in a consistent way, and you're using kind of the same management tools as well as APIs, as well as System Center across the two. and it makes it really for a differentiated story.
Excellent. You mentioned a lot of these announcements, particularly around the Azure pricing model. And I mean, watching Twitter myself, I saw that just absolutely take off. You also made some announcements in terms of allowing certain products to be run. SharePoint was one example. We've got a question from ECB Chuck that says, is Exchange available in the Windows Azure platform for dev testing?
We don't support Exchange for production apps inside Windows Azure. Technically you can install it and run it, but we haven't certified Exchange Server for email. We typically recommend customers to use Office 365's email Exchange capability as a cloud-based solution. But what we've done is we do allow you to use all of the MSDN dev test licenses now within Azure. And that's something that we previously didn't allow, and the MSDN use cases actually didn't allow you to use them in any hosted environment, whether a public cloud or even another hosted provider. And so we've changed that this week to kind of enable customers now to use them inside Windows Azure. And the nice thing that we've also done as part of this week's announcements is are enabling a special discount rate to use Windows Azure VMs and all of the server software that you get with your MSDN license at a fraction of what you'd pay otherwise, either in our cloud or anyone else's cloud. And so basically every MSDN customer can now run any number of Windows Server virtual machines starting at 6 cents an hour for a small instance, which is a 33% discount off of the standard price. And then you can also now run SQL Enterprise, BizTalk Server, SharePoint, and everything else in the MSDN use rights also at 6 cents an hour. And so that's a 97% savings for someone that previously had to stand up a SQL or BizTalk Server product for dev test, really is unique and differentiated in the market. What we've also then done today, which you can use with that offering, is enable you now to stop VMs on Azure and avoid any billing. And we've also moved to a per minute billing model. And so if you use, say, 6 minutes of compute time on Azure now, instead of it costing an hour, it would actually only cost you 6 minutes. And for for a lot of dev test workloads where they're very elastic, where you're spinning up and spinning down resources all the time, that per minute billing and the ability not to be charged when the VM is stopped, plus that extra, that special 6 cents discount, ends up being kind of an unbeatable offer that no one else has in the market. And then just to sweeten it a little bit more, we also are now moving to a model where every MSDN subscriber, whether you're MSDN Pro, Premium, or Ultimate, now get what we call MSDN credits, which are basically, think of them as dollars or whatever your local currency is, that you can spend on any Windows Azure resource for dev test. So for example, if you're an MSDN Premium customer, you get $100 a month of credits that you can spend on any Azure resource. So you can spin up 3 VMs and run them 16 hours a day for 31 days a month at no cost. And you could do whatever you want inside those VMs. You could spin up 80 VMs for 20 hours to do a load test. You could create websites and databases. You could create cloud services, encoding jobs with media. Whatever you want, you can spend them however you want. And that end-to-end combination, we think, really no one else in the market has, and I think makes it a kind of a killer value proposition, both for customers that want to build apps in the cloud and deploy them in the cloud. But one of the things I try to emphasize this morning is also the ability for you to build apps in the cloud using our dev test infrastructure, but then ultimately deploy it on the Windows servers and SQL databases that you run on premise. And that ability to kind of use the cloud to get agility, but still run on top of your existing infrastructure is also something differentiated. And if you look at all the other cloud vendors, whether it's Amazon or Google or others, I think now what we have that we announced today is really differentiated and unique, and it's something that no one else is really trying to do. And I think we've got 5 million or so MSDN subscribers. This is a killer offer for them to start taking advantage of.
Awesome. One last question, just to follow up on that Azure Pack. The question from FastADO is, when will the Azure Pack be ready for preview?
That's a good question.
So I know that's not going to be one of the things that's going to be released in June.
Okay.
We actually have to get back on that. I actually don't know what the date is on that.
Okay.
So
absolutely.
apologize.
Coming soon, though.
Coming soon to IT Center
You
near
got to
you.
take that first one just to have some fun with it.
Yeah, absolutely. The first one at Jeff James 3 says, so Brad, did you get any real track time in that Aston Martin came out on stage?
Yeah, that was literally me driving through the streets of Seattle last Sunday, going 80 miles an hour down the streets of Seattle. So definitely took one off the bucket list there. That was phenomenal. Going 60 miles an hour in first gear.
Wow.
Nice.
All right, Erwin, it's time to pick on you a little bit and talk a lot about some of these announcements that we have around Windows and Windows 8.1. And the common question I get, I've been out on the road for the last several months talking to a lot of our customers. What is in Windows 8, 8.1 for the enterprise?
Okay, yes. So this is an exciting moment for us because it's the first time that we are really talking about Windows 8.1. So let me give you the short summary of what Ian discussed this morning in the keynote. So with Windows 8.1, we are making the next step in our vision for Windows 8. And with Windows 8, what we delivered to the enterprise is an OS where we believe that we can enable experiences and new devices, experiences that people love, but at the same time making no compromises to corporate IT. And you probably have seen the new hardware experiences that were released in the market with Windows 8. Great tablets, great hybrid computers, laptops with touch, but also the software experiences and the ability for enterprises to build like line of business apps that are cloud connected back into the data center or into the public cloud. With Windows 8.1, we are continuing that vision of Windows 8. And the things that we talked about this morning is that, first of all, we want to make sure that Windows 8 tablets are the best business tablets, as well that Windows 8 is great on all devices that customers are using. So you saw some of the UI announcement or comments that we made this morning that further improve that Windows 8.1 tablets are the best tablets for our business customers because it comes with a beautiful UI. It runs all the apps that people care about, their current apps, their office apps, their productivity and line of business apps, as well as modern apps. And it fits right inside in their current infrastructure. With Windows 8.1, we are also enhancing the UI. We listen to customers, and we want to make sure that we could deliver great experiences for people that are working on laptops, desktops, maybe desktops with multiple monitors. And so we think that for people that maybe primarily or for a large time work in the desktop, that new features like boot to desktop, the ability to, when you're in the desktop, you can stay in the desktop. When you use your charms, you will not get to the start screen, but you can continue to work in the desktop. The new windowing. And what we have seen is that people that use both desktop apps as well as new apps, or mostly in the desktop, that they loved the experiences that we can deliver now with Windows 8.1. Secondly, we talked about mobility enhancements. With Windows 8, we released new scenarios for enterprise mobility, things like direct access and Windows to Go. And we further worked and enhanced some of those experiences with Miracast, wireless display, things like NFC tap and NFC Wi-Fi printing, making your PC or your laptop your personal hotspot, as well as improvements in VPN that are very important. And we showed like auto-triggered VPN, how that can make it easier for people that are on the go to connect to corporate resources only when they need it, because it can be initiated by the app itself. The third area I like to talk about is bring your own device scenarios, BYOD. And Brad already mentioned in his presentation that it's a trend that we see growing. Like customers are asking us, like, how can we improve those experiences? So things that we did here is, first of all, we are opening our API with Windows 8.1, as we want to make sure that we are like a great client for Windows Intune infrastructures for mobile device management, but also for third-party solutions, as well as where we are very excited about is the workplace join that Brad showed in his demo. The ability that if you have a personal device or an unmanaged device and you need to have access to your corporate resources, that is a very easy, convenient way and secure way to connect and then be able to go to your SharePoint documents, your Office documents, or your email. So the last thing I'd like to touch about shortly is the continuous investments that we're making in security. we made a major investment in Windows 8 on security for the desktop and for PCs and tablets. And we're making, again, a substantial investment in Windows 8.1 to help customers prevent getting malware, protect corporate data, as well as making sure that we support new modern authenticators for connecting and authenticating in the enterprise infrastructure, like fingerprinting or other biometrics. So that's in short what we did.
When we look at another area that customers seem to have concern with, it's around, obviously we're coming up on a big milestone in April of next year with XP end of life. What do I deploy to? If I'm in the middle of doing a deployment now, whether it be from XP to Windows 7 or if I'm Windows 7 to Windows 8, what are those decisions? Do I sit around? Do I wait? What is the guidance to those customers?
Yeah, that's a question we're getting a lot from customers at this moment. So, there's a couple of things here. And first of all, we feel that if customers are on Windows XP today, like the priority is to get to a modern OS. So that's number one what we think they should focus on. Secondly, when customers are deploying Windows 7, we think there is a business case and an opportunity to start integrating Windows 8 in that deployment project side by side with Windows 7 for things where we immediately see that Windows 8 has additional value. And you can think about here like mobility scenarios, tablets, and those things you can implement side by side with Windows 7. The third thing what we think is important, that when customers are refreshing their PCs today, or that they think about introducing touch immediately. And so our advice to customers is that to make sure that your investments are future-proof, start buying touch devices, touch laptops, touch ultrabooks, hybrids, to make sure that you can start implementing those modern experiences in the future. And the last thing here is that with the availability of the Windows 8.1 preview, we advise customers to start evaluating that Windows 8.1, start developing apps, like line of business apps in their organization for Windows 8, as well as plan to start deploying Windows 8 on all form factors in the future. Yeah.
At SearchWin Server has tweeted in a question for us around the Server 2012 R2 announcement. Brad, are you seeing customers clamoring, or even, I'll phrase it the other way, pushing back because of a faster release cadence that we're on? And even probably you could address this also, Scott, with this really accelerated cadence that we have both in Windows Server and Windows Azure.
Okay. Yeah, so the first thing I would point out is if we just kind of reflect back on the number of Windows Server releases in the last 10 years, there's been 6. 2003, 2003 R2, 2008, 2008 R2, 2012, 2012 R2. So 6 releases in 10 years. We're actually been delivering on a much quicker cadence than I think most of the world actually understands. If you take a look at virtual machine managers, so the fabric controller that we use for the private cloud, we've had a release of that every year since 2007 when we introduced it, okay? So, we have been actually releasing technology at a faster cadence than what much of the world has understood. I've never had a customer ever tell me that they want us to wait to get new value at. And so, the possibility of getting new value out from us faster is something that's enticing. But we also know that we have a responsibility to make sure that it's easier and more efficient to upgrade. And so we think about that as an engineering challenge that we take on ourselves, and it's certainly one of the things that we're learning from Windows Azure. And Windows Azure is constantly updating, so we learn every single day from Scott and his team if we haven't done our job from a Windows Server perspective, because remember, Windows Azure is based on Windows Server. So again, we take those learnings. But we're doing things like, things that we announced today, the Windows Server live migration from 2012 to 2012 R2. So that literally is a live migration between one version of Windows Server and another with 0 downtime. So the upgrade for that couldn't be any more simple. It's 25 seconds, 30 seconds, and you've upgraded your servers with 0 downtime. So that's the way we talk about it. We're getting innovation out faster. We will constantly work to make that easier and less complicated for customers, more compatibility. And just remind everybody that we have been on a fairly quick cadence with Windows Server and with the System Center capabilities for a number of years.
Yeah, I think to Brad's point, just sort of how do we get innovation out faster? And that's what we're trying to do likewise on the Windows Azure side. And so we generally try to do a major release every 3 weeks, and sometimes every 2, but generally we kind of aim for a 3-week cadence. And kind of knowing that there's a release vehicle throughout then means that we can react to kind of customer feedback really fast. And it also means that if someone misses a particular release window, there's another release in 3 weeks from now. And so it actually drives a good quality bar throughout the organization because people don't feel like they have to try to jam something in at the end. And it's kind of let us have kind of a pretty agile, kind of dynamic flow kind of model the last 12 months. And I think you're going to see it continue to accelerate. And so, I think the Build conference is roughly 3 weeks from today. And
a lot more things to talk about.
There could be a lot more great things to talk about. Yep.
Yeah. All right, at Jeff James 3, who I believe is on site. So how's it going? How much pushback are you still getting from some customers when it comes to the cloud? Is there still education that we need to do? Is there still that pushback?
Why don't you start this one?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's pushback. I mean, I think the nice thing about the cloud, and I think the phase that we're adopting, or the phase we're in terms of cloud adoption, is still relatively early in the cycle. And I think where we're kind of at now, which is kind of nice, is pretty much every organization I talk to sees value in the cloud for something. And so it's not so much a pushback on, hey, are we going to do public cloud or not? It's more a case of, what do we use it for? Is it for our mission critical SAP system? Most people aren't quite prepared to do that yet. And frankly, the public clouds, all public clouds aren't quite in the, I wouldn't start by putting your mission critical SAP system as your first deployment to the cloud. But things like dev test are kind of no-brainers. Adopting SaaS, is something we see more and more companies wanting to do. Storage and backup, likewise, no-brainers. I think one of the really compelling demos that we showed today in the keynote was around the recovery manager services with Hyper-V. That's a great scenario for how to use the cloud immediately. Things like tiered storage and some of the Store Simple work that we've done is likewise kind of a no-brainer for how people to adopt. And so there's lots of organizations that I think are increasingly adopting it, even if they still want to be very conservative about their mission-critical apps. But I don't have any doubt that over the next 12 months to 18 months, you're going to see more and more companies adopted for running their many of their tier 2 production apps in the cloud. And I think we're not too far off where every company is going to be looking seriously at their tier 1 mission critical systems, at least integrating the cloud to some extent.
Excellent.
And I just kind of build on what Bert talked about from EasyJet. I mean, think about their mission critical app is their reservation system. Mm-hmm. I just think of the numbers he gave, the number of planes that they're filling per minute in that January sale, which, we got to get something like that going in the U.S. as well, where they light all these things up for the summer. But that's a wonderful example of taking Azure and having that add value to your most mission-critical app in a way that's just seamless and it's simple. I guess a common standard that we'll see more and more of.
I want to kind of get a little bit into some of the developer aspects and the announcements made around Visual Studio today. And I guess the first question is, Visual Studio 2013, mm-hmm. What are some of those new offers in there, and how does that help the more modern developer?
Yeah, so just kind of building on the three or four points we put up on the screen there. A lot of this is really focused on how do you enable a faster life cycle, and that faster life cycle is again that scenario of dev, deploy, learn. Dev, deploy, learn. So there's a bunch of innovations that we did in there. The innovation of being able to look in the code and see who made the last changes, when were they made, what are the impacts, the ability to have the tests automatically running and have that service up just makes you more efficient. The acquisition that we announced was really about release management. So in that cycle of after you build, you're going to go deploy, and then you're going to iterate and deploy again. That just helps us to feed that cycle more and more. And then some of the things that we've done in Visual Studio as well is tighter integration with System Center. So the classical scenario there is if something happens with a production system, rather than having to have the developers come over and troubleshoot the production system, IT can now, with a couple clicks of the mouse, automatically create a virtual machine that automatically gets shipped off to the developers. They get flagged inside of Visual Studio. They can hydrate that virtual machine, troubleshoot it, and when they're done, then they use the things we just talked about in terms of release management and that lifecycle to deploy the updates. So it's really about that mean time to resolution, getting the updates out, and keeping the business advancing. That really is the fundamental things that we announced.
Excellent. Hey, for folks at home that are watching on Channel 9 Live, we're about to take you up to the Transform Your Data Center Foundation session. For those of you watching through the newsroom feed, we're going to keep these guys here for just a couple more minutes, ask a couple of questions. Make sure if you're online, watching on Channel 9 Live, watch all day long. We've got a ton of great stuff for you. We'll be back live from our main stage, so we'll see you guys in just a minute. Thanks. All right, so Scott, there's a big question that's now come up. I've got to call you out on this. Where's the red shirt, man?
The question is here, did the laundry lose Scott's red shirt?
I wore it during the keynote, so yeah, I got some fashion advice from someone that I should try a different color once or twice, and so I decided, at least for this press conference, we'll see whether or not I go back after this to my red shirt for the rest of the day.
We have a lottery going on how many of those he actually
try
has.
a nice azure blue.
There you go. See, that's the right answer there. It's the azure blue.
Love it, love it.
Stan, and I'm sorry, I'm not going to pronounce the last name. Quickly, in the last couple minutes that we have here, a couple of the new features for System Center 2012, and I'll give each of you just a minute to wrap up.
Okay. Literally, the way you should think about System Center is you know, it's Windows Server and System Center together. You know, if you kind of fundamentally step back and say what's happening in the industry, the definition of the operating system is changing and it's expanding. You know, its role is to continue to provide this hardware abstraction layer between the application and the hardware, but it has to do that now at the scale of a data center or of a cloud, just not at an individual server. And so really, as we think about System Center and Windows Server, we think, we plan, we develop as one holistic set of capabilities. So all the things we talked about in terms of the innovations in storage and in networking and the isolation and software-defined networking, all the things in terms of compute, those are all lit up at scale through System Center. And so all those things that we demonstrated, you know, those things all are innovations in System Center and Windows Server combined. The other thing I would just point out here is the new version of Orchestrator that will come out with this R2 release is now entirely based on PowerShell. And so the Orchestrator capability had its own, if you use its own automation language, that is now entirely based on PowerShell, which all the infrastructure being built across the entire company is based on PowerShell. That's something that's got a lot of warm reception from our early adopters as well.
Erwin, folks needing more information, I know you guys posted a couple blog posts, a couple last minutes to wrap up here on the announcements made around Windows.
Yeah, I can be very short. I think that, as I mentioned, this was exciting for us to be able to talk about enterprise features and features that we think will immediately benefit the IT organizations with Windows 8.1. At the end of the month, at our Build conference, it will be great to able to release a preview of Windows 8.1 to the world, as well as spend more time on some of the other experiences that we will release with Windows 8.1. Especially, we will go deep there on the application platform.
And you, Scott, also blogged today.
Yeah, you know, I think in terms of the dev test offer and some of the new dev test capabilities that I talked about in the keynote, I think if you're a developer, really, and especially if you're an MSDN customer, it's just a no-brainer to start using Azure for that immediately. Other great announcements, and I blog some more details about it, you can find on my blog, include a new BizTalk Services product that we just actually announced and shipped a preview of this morning. That provides B2B, EDI, and EAI integration capabilities. And we're really the first public cloud provider now that is offering enterprise-level integration services within the product, and really opens up a lot of capabilities. So if you have an SAP system on-premise, we have now an adapter within Azure where you can actually automatically connect your SAP system running on your existing hardware to Azure through BizTalk Services and integrate with any mobile or web app, as an example. We also shipped new SSL support for our websites, a bunch of Active Directory improvements, including the ability now to better integrate your Office 360, the directory that you set up with Office 365 with Windows Azure, a new free trial update, and then you saw throughout the keynote a bunch of great services with Recovery Manager, with Identity Management, and with Visual Studio, how you can now start taking advantage of Azure.
Excellent. Guys, I really appreciate you taking the time. I'd like to thank the press who are here in the room, and also thank all of you guys for watching online. They're telling me we've got to wrap it up. So you've got a blog too, right, Brad? I just saw your new post.
No
so go check out Brad's blog for all of the latest information. Guys, thanks for joining us. Everybody, thank you for joining us. We'll see you guys later. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.